Hi there everyone, I thought I'd do a quick video just covering the recent English Council results as well as the by-election in Runcorn. I think we can see that Reform has cleaned up across the board. Most importantly, they've got a new MP in Runcorn. I think very often the political elite can take council elections half seriously. They're sometimes just protest votes really. However, when you're losing MPs and there's been a big swing from Labour to Reform, that is a portent, and I do think that will worry Starmer. I think he's going to hit back quite soon, as we'll explore in a moment. But firstly, it needs to be said that Farage's strategy is clearly working here. Now, he may not be winning over the trad purists like me. I may have lost faith, and many in the online space may have too, but Joe Bloggs has not. And this tells us something quite interesting. First of all, in the online space, you do get lots of vibrancy, lots of ideas, lots of catalysts for new movements. But does that really translate into the political mainstream? You think about the fuss around Rupert Lowe. You think about Farage stating on GB News he's not really bothered about the white British becoming a minority in Britain, doesn't seem to care about that. And even poo-pooing deportation. Now, we did rein that latter one back in a bit, but it goes to show these things haven't really impacted the performance of Reform at the ballot box, at all. And that goes to show, while he might get a lot of heat in the online space, he's got massive leeway with the country. And I think that's for two main reasons. Rightly or wrongly, he's seen as the anti-immigration candidate. I've said since the beginning of this channel, the key themes of our era are immigration and identity. And whoever speaks to those, not just in British politics, but in European or even Western politics, is going to see success. Now, Farage, as we've just explored, has reined a lot of that in. He's been downplaying all of that side of his message, but it goes to show that he's still got that reputation amongst the public, rightly or wrongly. And there's lots of useful idiot leftists, calling Farage a racist and a fascist and, he hates migrants. Well, that's probably going to play well for him rather than against him. And he probably knows that. So he's being fed by a lot of useful idiot leftists with blue hair, and complaining about, whatever the latest trans issue is. And of course, that's a gift, and he can just ride that. He doesn't have to do anything, because as long as those people hate him, he's going to seem like the normal, rational one to the mainstream. The second major thing in Farage's favour is that he represents change. Now, people like me, as well as other commenters online, have said, this isn't going to be real change. It's just a reversion back to an earlier form of liberalism, especially economic neoliberalism, and maybe bordering on some conservative ideals. However, that's not really going to bring the change the public need, the Western world needs in my eyes. But that doesn't matter. What matters is it represents change to the public. Reform is new. Farage is relatively new in the political space, at least as an MP. On top of that, people are sick of Labour and the Tories. They've figured out they're basically the same thing, two different arms of the same system. So Farage can ride that right the way to electoral victory. Now, the interesting thing to watch here is going to be Keir Starmer's response. There are rumours he's going to have a reshuffle quite quickly, and I'd imagine that he's going to up his anti-immigration rhetoric. We have to remember that Starmer has been brought to heel. We all remember the first few months of his premiership. It was a total disaster. He went to war with all different factions of society. His handling of Southport was completely abysmal, and he totally lost the faith of the British public. And really, it was a lesson in what not to do as the Prime Minister. Now, in the second half of his premiership, it's quite clear he's turned into a continuity candidate. For the more recent months, he's been largely quite quiet, not caused much of a fuss, by the book, down the line. Now, as I said before, various people are making predictions as to what's gone on here. As I've said, Academic Agent on his channel is making a lot of noise about Tony Blair being back in the fold, pulling the strings of Labour and especially Keir Starmer. There are other people who think the globalist elite have got a handle on him, and some people who think, he's sounding more of a right-wing message because he's realised the country is increasingly sympathetic to reform. Whatever you view the situation as, it's quite clear that someone has got the collar of Keir Starmer. But this tells us something quite important, and that's, at least in my view, that it's all liberal containment anyway. I personally wouldn't buy the hype when it comes to reform, because they can't change what needs to be changed when it comes to the crunch, because it can't be changed by elections. I personally believe you can't even change it on the national level. It's an illusion to think we can, and a misunderstanding of the situation we're in, to think if you vote in the right people, we're going to end immigration and all of a sudden we're going to start getting wealthier and we're going to have a cohesive country. The damage is already done. The fifth column is already here. We're under total control of the globalist liberal system, not just in Britain, but the whole of the Western world, arguably the whole of the world at this point. And it's those people at the very top that dictate policy on a national level. That's why Starmer, Macron, Cameron, Joe Biden, they all say the same thing. It's all the same WEF, globalist messaging, our values of tolerance and diversity and inclusion, which of course aren't national values at all. And we're not supposed to notice everybody saying the same thing, whether it's in Australia, whether it's in Britain. So what does this mean? Well, I think the only way out of this, in my mind, is some sort of unity between European nations, or ideally the Western nations, because it's only that that's going to allow us to absorb the impact of the globalist economic elite, is if people are actually standing together. And that sounds mad, because we think, well, this is completely against what we've been in the last 100 years, independent nation states. Well, we have to realise that's an illusion. What we're really governed by is globalist liberalism, all of us now. And the only way to overcome it is to join together and push back for our own. I would even say it's more than national, maybe international sovereignty, which is really what I would say is the defence of Western culture that can only really come from the Western people united. Now, again, this may sound crazy, but we're already ruled by essentially one unified system. And second to that, many, many people across the Western world are going through exactly the same thing that we are in Britain. So whether it's Canada, whether it's France, I think the Americans are somewhat shielded by MAGA, but I think in time, like Reform, that will be revealed to be basically just an illusion. What's beneath it is the same system that's ruling us all. And when we realise that, that's when we will actually have a chance to push back against this. You may say that I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. Ironic, eh? But this is why I believe at this time the best thing we can do is realign with our tradition, get yourself healthy, fit and well, calm, centred, ready to withstand what's coming, because there's going to be a lot more drama and there will be a lot of false promises along the way. That's why I have this channel on spiritual and personal transformation. You can check that out down below. If you want exclusive content and connect with me, do join the Substack. And otherwise, do subscribe to this channel and let me know your thoughts down below. Enjoy the rest of your day.